2020 was a strange time, and like many gamers, I binged on video games hard, exploring new and interesting experiences that I never tried before, like RimWorld and Kenshi, and pretty importantly, retro shooters. I adored the FPS genre for the longest time. I just played multiplayer shooters, so I never really had a nostalgia for the old style of shooters, like many of the boomers of the gaming world would, but I did get recommended a few to try. So naturally I tried Doom 2016. What we got was a reimagining of the retro shooter, and yeah, I didn't like it. I got bored by the halfway point, so it might be surprising to you when I say that its sequel was my game of the year in 2020. So why? It felt like the game I wanted to play for years. He had insanely kinetic movement, the ridiculous and absurdly punishing combat that I've grown to adore over the years, and the sweet meshing of all the mechanics together. Nothing felt like it was useless, and it just felt really cool. And it's been a while since I felt that when I played a video game. Not since I was a wee lad booting up Devil May Cry 3 for the first time. So Ultrakill did what Doom did, except better. So let's talk about it. Ultrakill is a first-person shooter character action hybrid that's currently in early access. It's like the beautiful offspring of Devil May Cry and Quake after a night of sexy kissing. It's developed by Hakita and published by New Blood. I became a fanboy of New Blood when I played Dusk for the first time. It made me fall in love with the old school philosophy that they employed in their design. And hey, I don't think it's a bold claim to say that Dusk might be responsible for making retro shooters popular again, or the boomer shooter genre if you want to be memey about it, and I'd argue that more than Doom 2016, maybe in an indie sense however. So without any hesitation, when I seen that they were publishing Ultrakill, I knew instantly something was up. I looked at the release trailers and what the fuck is that? Is that a style meter? Okay, you got me. I know certain games in the past have tried to implement more character action-y features, but a style meter is such a specific design that's only really present in niche character action games, Japanese ones to be particular. So I bought it immediately, played it from start to finish, spent a few hours in the cyber grind and then put it down. And goddamn I wanted more. So I wanted to wait for the full release, but I just really couldn't. So a couple of weeks ago I decided to give the game another chance. So there was quite a bit of content added since the last release, so I didn't feel quite as guilty of booting it up, but holy shit I didn't realize how much I missed out on. So I booted up a new save, played it on the hardest difficulty, and instantly my testosterone levels grew to unheard of levels. Like if I was on an IV drip of bull sperm. Sorry, I mean Tori. Ultrakill is deep. Deeper than your Sonic OC made when you were 11 years old. Deeper than your Ma's love and affection for you. Magnitudes deeper. There's so much tech to be learned that the game feels like it needs hours to master. It's similar to Doom Eternal in the way that everything in your arsenal has its purpose, and you have to use it all to succeed. But the comparisons just don't end there, so be prepared to hear like Doom a lot. Not that it's a Doom clone, as much as I hate that phrase. It just does what Doom did, except better. Mankind is dead. Blood is fuel. Hell is full. You'll hear that a lot when people bring up Ultrakill. It's just as iconic as the game itself and explains pretty much everything you need to know and about what you're getting into. It works from a mechanical and story perspective. And well, you don't need to know the story. You could go the entire game without even interacting with it. But let's break it down. Mankind is dead. The humans have gone extinct, and the only remaining beings left on the planet are the machines. Blood is fuel. The machines need blood to survive, so we're dealing with a Terminator-like scenario where the robots took over. I guess we're the baddies. But blood has run out on the surface. Hell is full. All the souls of the damned, essentially containing an infinite supply of blood, so we had to race to the depths of hell and search for more. You play as V1, who seems to be going through all the layers of hell, a la Dante's Inferno, to satiate your thirst for blood. Along the way you meet other killer death robots who are here for the exact same reason, though they're a source for blood too. So I wonder if before all the blood went dry on the surface, was there just some giant robot battle royale going on? there still could be. You get one small cutscene at the end of Act 1 that adds a little bit more context to the story. There's a few tidbits of lore that are scattered all over the game's world that explains a little bit more, and there's codex entries for all the enemies you come across. I like this way of indirect storytelling. I always found it way more compelling than the alternative. It just means you can choose to interact with it if you want. There is some interesting lore surrounding some of the bosses, and one of them gets a lot of attention in particular, for a damn good reason. At this point we're at a narrative standstill, and that's fine. What we got here is foundational. I imagine we'll get something greater down the line, but if we don't, it really wouldn't bother me. I really like the Ultrakill soundtrack. It might be one of the greatest game OSTs I've heard in a long while, and it's surprising to me that it hasn't been used to death in YouTube content today. Well, it is being used more these days. For example, in my last review, I used more of Ultrakill's soundtrack than the game itself. Most of the music is written by Hakita, under the moniker Heaven Piercer, and some of the music was made before the game was released, specifically for that project. It takes influence from a wide variety of sources. Apparently it falls under a genre called breakbeat, but there's some industrial rock, post-rock, drum and bass, and noise sprinkled all around. A lot of it does remind me of those weird Japanese demo disc games that you never bought, but they fascinated you nonetheless. It also feels like a more accessible Machine Girl album. There's a few public domain classical songs in the mix. And there's a weird obscure ballroom song called Take Care. Hey wait, it seems oddly familiar, like distant memory. Huh. What was I saying? There's a few songs in the soundtrack that were written by Hakita that would sound almost like they would fit that classical style pretty well. The album contrasts the noisy breakbeat sounds pretty well with the classical, and to be honest, it feels like it's just one of the better song arrangements in video games. There is one track that I want to go over because it's written by a completely different artist altogether, and currently it's the only song that's available in the Cybergrind. I'll go into details about that mode later, but this is a perfect song for this mode. Goes through so many different genres in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. It reminds me of what Mick Gordon would have written if he wasn't trying to hide his undying love for VTubers. Come on Mick, we know, don't try to hide it. Overall, the soundtrack is pretty amazing, and I'd highly recommend throwing some of your fun bucks Hakita's way if you'd like to. As for the sound design, it's pretty reactive and powerful. Like, all the effects are super clear and not annoying in the slightest. Everything sounds pretty satisfying and complements each other pretty well. Say for example the parry. It's clear, enforces how satisfying it is to pull it off, or the sound of your slam when you hit the ground. Or your dash. It all presents a weighty feeling to the game, and it does make sense seeing as you are an apocalyptic war machine. Every enemy has their own unique sound effect associated with them, so it's easy to identify who's attacking you at any given time. The projectiles can sound pretty similar at times, although they have their own unique rhythm in the fire rates. Some of the bosses have very clear audio cues for their attacks. One of the first bosses you fight is the sword machine. It flails around the arena, slashing at you with its chainsword, cosplaying a space marine. The weapon sound effects are pretty nifty too. Everyone's favourite boomer shooter weapon, the shotgun, sounds amazing. The mechanical shrapnel blast and the reload after sounds great. But that's only one of its firing modes. You got this charged shotgun, and it sounds brutal, and this explosive shot, which just sounds exactly how you'd want it to. Then there's the nail gun's alternate fire. Just the sound of this emptying its entire clip within a few seconds, creating this molten sound effect as the bullets are set alight. It's pretty dope. Overall, sound good. I want to quickly take you back 10 years ago, when the indie craze was at its height of popularity, and the oversaturation of pixel art games was ever clear. At the time, if your game wasn't inspired by some SNES classic, you were doing something wrong. It became a crutch to developers who were using the style more because it looked cool, and it conformed to that indie style. It always felt like to me that the developers really didn't understand what they were working with, or how the classics worked. Now, don't get me wrong, there was some crazy good games visually, but how many times did you buy a bundle on the Humble Bundle store and it had 5 completely unmemorable indie games whose style you've seen before and was all but forgotten even back then? So the pixel art craze faded out, and occasionally some indies will go back to that style. Unfortunately, it seems like the same thing is happening these days with the modern day retro shooter. Like, ask yourself this: how many games have you played recently that you can clearly identify what every enemy does at a glance? Usually, you can't. That's why strong silhouetting is important. Color design too, and a clear visual distinction so that everything meshes really well together. Ultrakill doesn't make these mistakes. It pulls some interesting designs from games of different genres all together in a beautiful orgy style. Every character and every environment is designed so clearly within the limitations of the PSX low poly aesthetic. Visual noise is kept to an absolute minimum, particularly in the environments. Sure, there's showers of blood and flashing lights, explosions, but it's never going to leave you with a migraine afterwards. The character models have a low poly count, and generally the animations are over exaggerated. I think that's a plus. Everything looks pretty uniform and how you'd expect in a retro shooter, down to the color grading. It's clear as day that the first part of the game draws a lot from Quake. The enemies are pretty demonic, and everything has that dull palette of brown, greys and greens. Now, Ultrakill isn't the only game that does this, and I think it helps to draw you in if you're into retro shooters, but that doesn't last long. Take for example this. Or this. The art style is striking in places. It's like, as I said before, it pulls from so many different games and combines them together so well. You got clear inspirations from this Bayonetta thing, Pepsi Man, and then for some reason Tyrael. Oh, and one last thing. The amount of options you have to customize your viewing experience is amazing. Not only can you customize your UI down to the colors, but you can adjust your screen shake, FOV, resolution options, and even if you don't like some of the more over the top visual effects, you can turn them down too. And there's a PlayStation filter. This is just impressive. Ultrakill wears its influences on its crusty battle vest, and I'd argue it does it better than its contemporaries. It's pretty challenging, and it makes you feel really cool. At first, it's so simple, but the depth comes with the more time that you give it. Eventually, you will become an unstoppable god. At the start of the review, I referred to blood as fuel. Well, it is, and now you have an understanding for the health system in Ultrakill. Well, I'll explain it in a little bit more detail. So how does it work? There's no health pickups in this game, maybe minus some secret pickups that will give you double health, but otherwise, nada. You can only regenerate health by absorbing the blood of your foes. In a way, it's similar to how Doom Eternal lets you regenerate health by glory killing everything you see, minus the animation. It just encourages relentless aggression. At first this can be difficult, though if you are used to Doom Eternal, you'll feel right at home here. Speaking of aggressive playstyles, Ultrakill's movement is ridiculously good. Okay, so let's imagine this. You're a technologically hyper-advanced war machine. What's the first thing that you think you'd be able to do with this level of machinery? Well, you can jump. You can do a dash, air dashes too. You can slide and you can wall jump. And if you want to bring yourself to the ground, you can slam. Already, we have many ways of fun traversal, but we can look at this a little differently. For example, one of the most iconic aspects of old-school first-person shooters is the rocket jump. Damage yourself for insane mobility. It's a high-risk, high-reward mechanic. Sometimes you die. Maybe sometimes you blast off into space. Now what if you can jump and dash to cover extreme distances? Ultrakill's movement options are flexible and vital to the core gameplay experience. Generally, the whole focus on movement in shooters as a trend lately has been its biggest benefit, and has allowed for more creativity in gameplay, especially when everything can be teched in so many different ways. But it even goes deeper than what I mentioned before. So there's some mechanics in the game that I don't even think Akita thought of. For example, the slam storage. If you jump and slam together in quick succession after you latch onto a wall, and then jump after you hit the ground, you essentially boost to maximum height. Or sliding after you do a dash jump. This will carry over a little bit of speed from the dash jump. These, while not being 100% essential to the gameplay, is what makes this game so interesting to me. There's a lot of tech that I can't pull off correctly, or consistently for that matter. but that's what makes it super fun. There's always something to learn. There's a guy called Herb Messiah on YouTube. He covers all the movement tech that's available in Ultrakill comprehensively, so definitely check him out, and without his help, I don't think I would have ever seen a more complex side of this game. Now let's get onto the gunplay. I think it's important to say that Ultrakill's gameplay really doesn't shine until you unlock its full arsenal. Once it gets unlocked, you have so much variety, and all these weapons can be chained together and comboed to increase your style ranking and to do high amounts of damage. So I generally recommend using weapons more as tools rather than sticking to one weapon, because all of them have such great synergy with each other in unconventional ways. Take for example the starting pistol. Unlike most starting weapons, this can be used all the way into the end game, and it's incredibly satisfying. Every weapon in the game has an alt-fire that can be useful in so many different situations. In the case of the pistol, it can shoot a charge blast that can penetrate crowds of enemies, or it can be used as an initial burst damage on bosses before swapping to something else. The other alternate fire, however, is pretty badass. You can flick up to 4 coins and then shoot them to create a powerful ricochet that will lock onto any enemy it sees, dealing bonus damage. Now what's super interesting is, there's a short window where the coin flashes, and if you shoot the coin, the shot will split, tracking 2 separate enemies. That's already satisfying on its own, but keep in mind, this can also combo with the other pistol's alt-fire for insane damage, and also other weapons too. Now it may seem complicated at first, and it can be for newer players, but after a while, you'll get used to switching out weapons for their specific functions. Another example is the shotgun. This thing is the chef's kiss of the game, and if you wield it correctly, it'll be your primary damage dealer and crowd control weapon. When you unlock the second alt-fire for the shotgun, you can circumvent the reload by switching firing modes. This allows you to be constantly doing heavy damage. But that's not all. If you parry right as you fire the shotgun, you can create a projectile boost. This will create an explosion on impact. You can also chain this with the shotgun swapping, and you can rocket jump with it. There's 2 other weapons in the game, the nail gun and the rail gun. While still fun, they're definitely not as complex as the former examples, but they still can be used for great effect and definitely have their own purposes. Like the nail gun, you can set up traps and combo that with the alternate fire to create a disgusting flaming landscape, or the rail gun just to do great burst damage. You can also swap out your parrying hand for a shotgun hand to safely eradicate fodder at close range. Oh, and you also have a grappling hook, which you can use regardless, but you can only get this at the end of Act 2. It's mechanics like these that keep bringing me back to the Doom Eternal comparison, and if you look at any of Ultrakill's content creators out there, they generally covered both games. From hot swapping to using every weapon in your arsenal, to advanced movement techniques, and the chessboard approach to the enemies. In my opinion, Ultrakill does this almost better in every regard. Almost. Let's briefly talk about the level design. You'll be going from arena to arena fighting the mass hordes of hell, and generally the arenas aren't all that big. I love what they did with some of the encounters. They are really creative. Like there's this power box level. When you destroy the power boxes, it spawns a set amount of enemies, and a lot of the arenas have environmental traps, like spikes and glass floors. Hell, you can knock everyone off the map too. Just purely speaking from an arena standpoint, I just wish they were a little bit more intricate. The levels as a whole do always have something unique going on with them. There's key hunting, sure, but it's not as egregious as other games in the genre. One of my favorite levels in the game is in Act 2, where you're carrying a torch through a dark tomb. Whenever you light up a torch, a small horde of enemies will spawn, similar to the power boxes. However, at one point you'll come across this room, and you will get greedy, and this will lead to the death of the player 9 out of 10 times. There's also something to be said with the amount of freedom you're given to approach these levels. They allow for a lot of the game's unique traversal options, and are built for many playstyles. You can speedrun through certain areas if you know where to look, though that was never going to stop the speedrunning community. They'll always find a way. There's also plenty of secrets to be found, though they aren't all that exciting. There is some exceptions however, and those exceptions are just downright insane. I just really think you should try find some of them on your own. If not, don't be ashamed to look up a guide. Overall, I would have liked to see a little bit more from the design and the commitment to special mechanics. I could be wrong and it could outstay their welcome in the future, so it's more so of a, I don't know, maybe when the game's complete, maybe I'll appreciate the variety more, who knows. And to be fair, it does look like there'll be more creative platforming in arenas in Wrath, so that'll be a treat. As far as the power-ups, there's only 2 that are currently available. You got the aforementioned health boost, that'll double your health, but there's also the dual wielding power-up, which comes in Act 2, and it's absurdly fun. You do incredulous amounts of damage, and you can stack them too. When you do this, nothing can stand in your path. I would like more power-ups in the game, and maybe we'll get them eventually. Now for the enemy design, and to be fair, it can be a bit of a mixed bag. Don't get me wrong, it can be genius at points, especially in the latter half, where the game really starts to get inspired of what to do with them. Though in the tutorial, you aren't really given that impression. At the start, you're introduced to the Filth, who will constantly chase you down, trying to get a bit of that sweet V1 booty. Shortly after that, you get the Stray. This dude looks like he managed to escape Ramsay Bolton's Happy Fun Time Castle. He's the first of the many projectile type enemies, and the only really unique thing about him is, well, he thinks you're Ramsay. The Schism is like the Stray, but it shoots out a burst of projectiles, and it has a different weak point. And then you got... Sorry, I mean the Soldier. He's just an augmented version of the Stray. This time he shoots with the 4 shots, and now here's where the problem lies. Sure, I get it, you need to have fodder enemies with escalating difficulties, but this is the weakest part of the enemy roster, and it's purely because of the repetitiveness of it, and that's a shame, because a lot of the other enemies tend to be pretty unique. Take for example the Street Cleaner. These guys are kinda like the Filth in a way. They rush you down, but are tankier and come in fewer numbers, and use a flamethrower for the damage, but they have a weak spot on the back, meaning you're gonna have to get creative in how you're gonna deal with them. I'd advise just coin-shotting them, that seemed to work out for me a lot. Or keeping them at bay with the feedbacker. Also, they dodge, and I think they're the only enemy in the game that can dodge. It's only when you start to fight the mini-bosses that the Doom chessboard comparison comes into effect. Some of the tutorial bosses you fight end up becoming regular old enemies. And sure, I know this has been done to death in games years ago, but I just love it. It's just one of my favorite tropes. Later on, the roster does get a little bit more creative. Like look at these Seraphim looking floaty balls. These guys hide, they shoot beams of light from the sky, and if you leave them for too long, they become enraged. Oh yeah, the enraged mechanic. Some enemies in the game have a prerequisite for becoming enraged, and they do so when you piss them off. This makes them so aggressive, they attack much faster, and move much faster also. Now for the bosses. I'm only going to be covering the first 2 bosses, though if you really don't want to know about them, skip to this timecode. Firstly, you got the Sword Machine. This guy is by far the most aggressive thing that you would have come across up until this point. This fight could filter out a few players. If you're playing on higher difficulties, it forces you to learn its attack patterns. There's a very easy comparison that I could give this guy gameplay wise, but I've gone long enough in this video without mentioning it, so let's keep avoiding it. You eventually learn that parrying is essential in this game, and movement is also key offensively and defensively. The first time you fight him, you take off his arm, he gives you access to the shotgun. Then you fight the second phase at the end of the level. But what's interesting is if for some reason you decide to do the level again, you can use the shotgun to skip the first encounter. Then you can fight the 2 phases at once. I love this. Games, do this more, please. And then the second boss fight I'm going to mention demonstrates something completely different. In first-person shooters, the giant bosses are a little bit boring. If it's not just a bullet sponge, then it has some weird mechanic associated with it, or it forces the player to fight against multiple minions. I'm looking at you, Doom Eternal. But Ultrakill does things a little bit differently. Because it's so mechanically dense, it allows for the bosses to be interwoven so perfectly well into the core fabric of the game. This is really rare in shooters, and I think this is where the Devil May Cry DNA truly shows. And the Hideous Mask is no exception. It has constantly changing weak points that require strong movement, and even though it's on the larger scale, the first person perspective helps with the camera issues that would sometimes be prevalent in the action hack and slash genre. The last thing I want to touch on in the gameplay is the options you have available. You have the main campaign of course, but then you have the sandbox mode, which is essentially your practice space. You can turn on cheats here and practice your movement and other mechanics to your heart's content. Think of it as a training mode, where you can just spawn in whatever you want and just play around with the game systems. I'd strongly recommend going into this to practice some of the tech with no limitations, and learn the enemy counters. Or if you want to set up some unique challenges for yourself, this is the place to go. It reminds me of another sandbox game. Huh. That was weird. You've also got the Cybergrind for the sadists among you. The Cybergrind is a semi-randomly generated arcade mode, where you're presented with some of the most stupid challenges you'll ever come across. This is hectic. Every single round, there'll be a new variety of enemies, and also the grid changes too. You'll learn the grids pretty well, though it does present an issue with the game design. I wanted to mention this before, but I think this is the best place to talk about it, and that's the AI. The AI can be pretty dumb at times. They can get stuck in jump loops indefinitely, and sometimes they have no method of chasing you up to higher places, and then they can just yeet themselves off the map. This is especially noticeable when you're fighting the Cybergrind versions of some of the bosses. Look, it happens all across the game, but here it's pretty prevalent. The Cybergrind can also be customized to an extent. You can use some of the provided textures and choose what layouts will spawn. You can download more textures and layouts to the game, So if you want the Cybergrind to look like some id-tech shooter from years prior, you can download the textures and just install them in the game's directory. Simple as that. If you get far enough in the Cybergrind, it will allow you to start at higher waves. So you can always start with what kind of challenge you want. I've only gotten to wave 20 on Violent, and it does get super chaotic. Overall, it's pretty comprehensive, and certainly replayable. I'm not going to spoil everything in the game, but I want to talk about some of the cooler moments. Some secret, some not. There will be a focus on the bosses to some extent. Keep in mind that because the game is still in early access, some of the late game content might be different in the final release. Think of this as having a discussion about the cool shit we got now, and in the future, the review will only be for the halfway point. I'll also be talking about some of the secret levels, and interesting stuff that you can find, so I guess viewer discretion is advised. I want to start by looking at V2, the other robot you encounter during your journey. He's essentially you but cooler. What's really interesting about fighting V2 is that it's like you're fighting an intricate multiplayer bot that plays by all the rules that you'd play by. The first fight with V2 is almost like it's showing you how the game should be played, and you'll get your ass pounded repeatedly until you understand that. Sure, you can play at range, dodging all of its attacks and occasionally going back to get some health, but that's not how it's supposed to be played. It's like a hornet and a bee fighting to the death, and after you beat them, it runs away, and you fight it later on. Except this time it's adapted, and it's much more difficult to deal with. I assume this won't be the only time this happens, as I imagine at some point we'll fight Gabriel again, and knowing how difficult that boss is. I love this trope, I really do. Speaking of Gabriel, god damn! When the game initially went into early access, he was the final boss, and it was pretty insane. Unlike V2, he plays by different rules, and he can be pretty hard to keep track of. You will have to get used to fighting him if you want to go for the P ranks later, and to be honest, I truly didn't understand how to fight him properly until I went for the P ranks. Of course getting the whiplash arm helped, but seriously, after a while, you can just clown on this loser. He's voiced by the professional voice actor and meme lord Johnny Montegrado.
I mean, I hope I piss myself. I hope I piss myself and you call me your little pee-pee piss boy.
Apparently a lot of his lines were improvised, which is just perfect. If I'm to be honest, everything was leading up to this point. No. Definitely not. This is what I wanted to talk about for so long. At the start of 2-1, you're given an incredible view of what's to come, and the more astute of you would have noticed that giant in the distance with the big glowy eyes. I mean, truly, how could you not notice this guy? This is the corpse of King Minos, the boss you fight at the end of the layer. In 2-4, you finally reach him, in the Court of the Corpse King. There's something about the atmosphere that reminds me of System Shock. As you progress through the tunnel, you encounter a giant hand blocking your path. It starts slapping from left to right, shooting waves of damage at you constantly. So you just have to do as much damage as possible and make it run away like a coward. Then after a quick key hunt, who obliterates the roof? Of course you know who it is. This to me was the most visually striking moment in the game. You fight this titan and it feels almost sad in a way. He tries to punch you a bit, but with your Giga Chad robot arms, you parry him back, flailing in pain. He sends out little orbs that try to reduce your health down to 1, so if he does, you're dead. Don't let that happen. That only happens to the children and the elderly. These skeletal serpents will pop from where his eyes used to be. They start to shoot waves and volleys of projectiles at you. You can parry these too, and then that's really all there is to it. You can cheese him with the whiplash to get an easy P rank. It's honestly the scale of this boss that I love the most, and as I said before, Ultrakill does big bosses really well. You beat him and you enter his corpse through his throat to travel to the next part of the game, on your path to fight Gabriel. But that is the end. After getting the P rank in all levels in Act 1, you're granted access to the secret level accessible from Tree 1, the first and only Prime Sanctum in the game. This is not for the faint of heart, and currently, it's the most difficult content in the game. You travel down what seems to be a spine to come across your first challenge, the Flesh Prison. Oh my god, this fucking thing. This is a test of movement and crowd control. This ass right here summons these eyeballs all around him, and they shoot projectiles at you, and after a certain amount of time, they'll pop one by one to regenerate the Flesh Prison, sometimes to maximum health. It's all dependent on how many you actually kill. Oh, and you thought that was it? Well, what about these pillars of light? Or this bullshit barrage of projectiles? And he has that stupid orb that you shouldn't get hit by, but you will because you're a child and also maybe elderly. This boss is chaos, and it takes a while before you get it down. Usually you want to keep track of the eyeballs, to make sure that you have a manageable amount to deal with during the regen phase. The coin and projectile boosting of your friends here. I just love this boss aesthetically though, he's just fucking creepy. So, once you get that down, the true nightmare begins. Minos Prime. Minos Prime is voiced by Stephen Way and is the most difficult boss in the game, if not one of the most difficult bosses I've fought in first-person shooters, period. It took me about 4 hours and 40 minutes to beat him the first time, and I have 22 hours in this game as a recording. Take what you will, I might suck at this game, but it's hard, trust me. And by God did I have a blast at every second. Where the Flesh Prison was focused more on fast-paced movement around the arena, Minos focuses on more micro movements. And by that I mean spamming the slide all around, only jumping slightly, and dashing deliberately. This is the only boss in the game that I know all of the moves off by heart. And you'll have to too. He will call out every single move before he does it. So get used to learning the audio cues and keeping tabs of all your resources meticulously and always keeping track of them in the fight. All of his moves are super telegraphed and a lot of them are situational, but he spams them a lot. He feels like a boss from a different game. No. And hey, he looks pretty cool as well. It's truly the ultimate test in the game right now. And if you can beat him on violent, there's nothing, and I mean nothing, that will be able to challenge you anymore. In the future, I hope when other difficulty levels get released, and more Prime Sanctums, that the quality is just as high as Minos Prime, thematically and gameplay wise. Oh god, what if we got V2 Prime? Oh no! The last few things that I want to touch on are the other secrets in the game. There's currently 2 secret levels available, and they're so off the wall creatively, and they really pay homage to some of the more modern cult classics that we would have played. Take for example 1S. This is literally just a witness, and when I found out about this, I was blown away. This is not what you'd expect from a super fast-paced first-person shooter secret level, and it truly did set the bar of what's to come. And I wasn't wrong. Look, when you're having a philosophical debate on the purpose of life with a schoolgirl V1 in the style of a visual novel, then you know you should be excited for what's to come. Other than that, there's some smaller secrets, like the Cancer Rodent, and Mandalore Gaming and Xiaomi. And they're just nice references to the greater gaming content creators we got out there right now. Because this game is in early access, there's a lot to be expected. Some suggestions might already be on the table. Some I hope might be picked up on, or some might not make it at all. But I just want to throw some shit at the wall and see if it sticks. Oh, and I'm not gonna say multiplayer because it just wouldn't work. Firstly, I'd love for the cyber grind to be expanded. So what would I want to be expanded? Well, Steam Workshop support might be nice to start off with, just to download the texture packs and layouts. I'd also like if the power-ups were implemented in some way. Maybe it could be associated with how much damage you were doing or how quickly you killed the floor. It would also be nice if the grid could be expanded a bit more, and maybe a little bit more intricately, like maybe having roofing patterns or different shaped grids or something like that. The option to save patterns and layouts would be nice too. It would also be nice if you could load more of the game's music into the cyber grind, because as much as I like the song, I just think it's a waste to have some of the greatest music just being relegated to their specific levels. And also, seeing as it is a New Blood game, maybe have some of the tracks from Dusk or a Medieval or anything else. It'd be cool. I don't know if it'd be possible, but it would be cool. Secondly, I have this wild idea. So the concept would be on the harder difficulty levels, that the levels would be mirrored, and you'd start at the end and you'd go to the beginning, and the enemy placements would be slightly different. Maybe have some of the later game enemies appear in the early levels. That'd be pretty dope. It would be great for some repeated challenge. Like, wouldn't it be nice if the sword machine and other bosses just kind of became part of the enemy roster, like they do in the cyber grind? I also think the power-ups should be expanded in some way. Now, this is something that I think might make it into the game at some point, but I'd like a devil trigger system in the game. It could work like this, where your stamina regenerates faster and you have a higher cap for it, and you passively drain health from enemies around you. You could earn it by building up style points. I thought this was how the dual wielding power-up was going to work when I first seen it. But if it clashes with the design, maybe it just could be another power-up at some point. Though, more power-ups would be nice. Lastly, I have one minor change, and that's the option to have 2 separate keybinds for the slam and slide. I think this would help quite immensely with the movement tech that's in the game, but it'd also make it a lot more reliable. Oh, and we also need Big John. Every game needs Big John.
Kill me, come on!
I wonder how long the script's gonna be. Oh, for fuck! I think that's just a testament to what an excellent package we got here with Ultrakill. And it has so much potential going forward. I am just so excited to play more, and we will get more. Hakita's constantly updating the game with new additions, and the new layer of the game, Wrath, will be coming soon. It'll be exciting to see what comes next. When the game gets its full release, I'll be sure to come back to it and make a follow-up video. When I do, there will be a link somewhere below, maybe up there. I don't know how YouTube works. Currently, you can get Ultrakill on Steam for €16.79, or your regional equivalent, which all should be somewhere here. The price will be going up after the early access period, so it might not be accurate when it does release. And you know what? Fuck it, I'm gonna make one more recommendation. Pick up the OST on Bandcamp. It's €4. Like, seriously, do it. Anyway, need I say more? Just go play it. That's me. Goodbye.